Before we get started with today's video, I've got an absolutely crazy statistic for you guys. In the year of our Lord 2025 so far, the statistics on watch time from subscribers and not subscribers is actually pretty wild on this channel. Now, to my subscribers, I love every single one of you, but the watch time for people who are not subscribed is over 85%. Holy crap. So, if you are a part of that 85%, please consider subscribing. I do videos like this on a very consistent basis, and of course, on top of the reviews that I do, like videos like this, we also do the deep dives into the conflicts in the Gundam series. Plus, more of these might come for different series in the future. We'll have to see what happens. Regardless, hit that subscribe button, like, share, the whole 9 yards. Let's go ahead and get to our discussion today, which is about why Gundam X fell short. Mobile Suit Gundam, as of a few years ago, became the biggest money-making franchise in anime, when it ended up pulling in around 107 billion yen per year, with half of that coming from Gunpla sales. It goes without saying that it's the most popular mecha franchise on Earth, and just about every Gundam television series has seen varying degrees of success. Even the series that I believe are creative failures, like Gundam Seed and The Witch from Mercury, did manage to pull in substantial profits, largely from basically being series that targeted a different demographic, who seem to enjoy really bad or abusive relationships, instead of those of us who, enjoy complicated war stories. No, I'm not stopping, by the way. So with the formula of war is hell, buy our toys doing so well for them, has there ever been a Gundam series that fell short financially? Well, what we're going to be talking about today is the one show that Gundam has that can be considered a fiscal failure, and is the only Gundam show that's been outright cancelled due to abysmal ratings. Oddly enough, a discussion on this series is one of the most requested topics I've ever had on this channel, with the other two being people asking me to go over Unicorn and Victory. Gundam X is a show that was getting about a quarter of the ratings that G Gundam and Gundam Wing got on Japanese television, which is what led to the cancellation. Gundam would not see an upward trend in the ratings until the next series, Turn A Gundam, which was 3 years later. Since Gundam X, there hasn't been another Gundam series to be that kind of a flop. So, after watching this series, I think I've come to the conclusion of what exactly it is that caused this show to fail, especially in comparison to its predecessors in Gundam Wing, G Gundam, and Victory Gundam. Now, one thing I need to say before we go forward. The perspective on this that I'm taking is basically that of someone living in the time that this came out. So basically, TV was not bingeable, you watched episodes week to week, and you couldn't just dive into a show head first like that. There were different expectations for a show like this, especially given what was the predecessor, so it comes down to the idea of what is it that the Japanese person who came home at the end of a work week to watch a new episode of Gundam, what they were expecting going in. So, just a heads up. Now, we need to start at the beginning. Gundam X on paper should have knocked it out of the park. You had Shinji Takamatsu, director of the latter half of Gundam Wing, coming back to direct. You had Hiroyuki Kawasaki as the writer of the show, who had worked with Takamatsu on Goldran and J-Decker, and had also worked as a scriptwriter for Jushin Liger, the anime, not the wrestler, and Tekaban Blade. You also had Kunio Okawara returning to design some of the mobile suits as well, but not as many as he had done in the past. Like I said, on paper, this sounds pretty good. You've got a good amount of people coming in that made Gundam Wing as good as it was, so why didn't lightning strike twice? Well, we're going to break this down into sections on where things fall short, but we're going to conclude with the positives of this story as well. Now, one thing I need to preface things with. I do not think that this is a bad show. I think it's actually a really good show. The thing is, I'm going to talk about the shortcomings that kept people from watching this thing en masse, as I mentioned earlier. That's what you're looking for when you've got a television show and you want those sweet sponsors and those sweet Gunpla sales. Let's get started. We're going to go ahead and start with the downsides, so time to hit the Malomart theme. So I'm kind of glad that I prefaced what I'm about to say with the fact that this is a good show, because I'm going to be picking apart a few elements of this. What I would like you guys in my viewing audience to understand is that there are those of us who are longtime Gundam fans, and we are willing to suffer through what we would consider to be a slight problem or a partially weak element to a show for those story nuggets every episode that we love so much. What I am effectively breaking down is what would keep someone who has only a passing interest in what Gundam might have to offer away from watching Gundam X in the time that it came out. The first thing that comes to mind is the design of everyone's first thought when it comes to Gundam as a television show. The big robots. In this particular show, we do have some standouts. The X, the Double X, the Airmaster, and the X Divider are all great-looking mobile suits designed by Kunio Okawara. The problem is that the rest of the suits are really mediocre looking, if not just dull. I will freely admit I cannot remember, nor have I ever committed to memory, the single name of a single grunt suit in this series. I can remember the grunt suits of just about every other Gundam show I've ever watched, including Seed, by the way, but not Gundam X. I don't know what happened with this show, but I don't think that there was proper oversight in regards to making sure that there was memorable design across the board. Though, there is one key factor that I did notice when I was looking at the mecha designers for this show. There were a couple of names missing. Those two names would be Yutaka Itsubuchi and Hajime Kotoki, two guys that had been working on other Gundam projects prior to this, but did not work on this one. And I would also say are the other two best mecha designers, honestly, ever when it comes to Gundam. So you've got only one of the three best names that Sunrise has honestly had design robots for them, and they're just not there. So not having at least one of them to kind of help balance things out or to help you really get that iconic look to a lot of the mobile suits ended up hurting them. This is obviously a big problem for Sunrise in regards to model kit sales, but it also causes a problem aesthetically for the viewer. Let me say this as a writer who has a majority of his published work in the visual medium of comic books. Anyone who tells you that aesthetics don't matter in a visual medium is a fucking idiot. They always matter, because when it comes to watching a television show, we want to see things that cause us to be enamored with the universe that we are engaging with every time we take in a story. So, if one of the factors that brings someone into a show is whether or not the robots look cool, the worst thing you can do is consistently have robots that don't look cool. It's sort of like spending a bunch of money to open a burger restaurant and you don't season any of your food. If there's no flavor, nobody's going to want it. So that's a big negative right out of the start now, isn't it? The second major issue that they have is animation quality. There are episodes of this particular show that have pretty good animation, and there are other episodes that make you wonder if someone is asleep at the wheel. The one episode that always sticks in my mind is this episode with the Leopard, also known as the Wish version of the Gundam Heavy Arms, gets to actually be useful for 5 seconds and fight underwater. The guy who is the head of the forces that they're up against is one of the goofiest looking faces and head shapes that I've ever seen in an anime. He looks like he'd be one of the adults from the show Rugrats on Nickelodeon. This dude's skull, if you were to take an x-ray of his head, you'd think that he managed to evolve from a potato or some shit. I feel like one of the most common points that I make is that people watch anime for animation. If the visual element of the show's not there, they're just going to go watch something else that does have the consistency that they're looking for. I hate Naruto, and I didn't enjoy Bleach after, I want to say, the Soul Society arc, though there were some moments with the Iran cars that were kind of interesting. But as much as I shit on those shows and despise either elements of them or them as a whole, I will freely admit that they had very consistent animation quality. They might not be the kind of stories that I want to watch on a regular basis, but they always made sure to have the visual element be consistent, so that their audience never really felt like their desire for quality in the visual department was ever lacking. The second major thing that comes to mind is the score of this particular show. If you look back at G Gundam and Gundam Wing, both of them have very strong and pronounced orchestral scores with a lot of big energy that gets you excited for what's going on in front of you. A big part of what sells big moments is that orchestral score and how it interacts with the events that are going on as we watch the show. When you think of the unveiling of Gundam Epion and Gundam Wing, or when Wing Zero first unveils itself, you can hear the music in your head. Here's another good one for you. I'm going to put a song in your head by saying one phrase. Ready? Here we go. Close your eyes and follow along. This hand of mine is burning red. Its loud roar tells me to grasp victory. You now have the battle music from the latter half of G Gundam stuck in your head because you know exactly what is playing the instant that the God Gundam does the burning finger. This is what I mean by the necessity of a strong score. Unfortunately, Gundam X doesn't have it. The composer that they hired was a complete unknown and remained an unknown after the show for good reason. The orchestral score completely blends in with the furniture. In fact, some of the tracks are off rhythm. I'm someone who plays several instruments, and I've been playing music for most of my life, so I have an ear for things like this. If you ever want me to go insane, force me to watch one of those YouTube videos with a song that's offbeat. I have literally been driven near to insanity of the one of Chop Suey that's a beat off. It just No, it's not right, god damn it. Anyway, it drives me nuts, and Gundam X is guilty of that at points. Let's listen to 10 seconds of the track Deathline, and then we're going to transition over to When the Dragon Swims, Everything Ends from Gundam Wing. Now, admittedly, if this gets copyright struck or something like that, I'm going to have to clip the section out, so just listen to it on your own time if I've had to do that. Anyway, here we go. This is what I mean by having an orchestral score that sort of blends in with the furniture. Gundam X is supposed to be a war story of sorts and doesn't have the dynamic score that a war story needs. Nothing wrong with having down-paced and more subtle music when the scene demands it, but having these offbeat tracks that are almost always too subdued really hurts the viewing experience anytime you watch the show. It's really unfortunate because this sort of thing follows banger openings that the show has, which I will touch on later when we talk about the positives. The final thing that Gundam X had working against it was the pacing. Now, this isn't necessarily something that I complain about that much with Gundam X because I don't mind a show having a slower pace. Slow burn shows meant for a more mature audience are sort of where I find myself comfortable. Then again, this goes to what I said earlier about being able to tolerate some things that would push a lot of other people away. Because Gundam X is a slow burn, there are going to be people that look at this and see it as a show that takes too long to get where it needs to go if you're watching this on a week-to-week basis. To be honest, when I first watched Gundam X, I binged it almost all in one sitting. So my perspective is going to be based purely on the binging. I was able to see the full picture much faster than somebody who was coming home from their 90-hour-a-week or whatever office job with their shitty boss in Japan, just wanting to watch some Gundam and then feeling like they got nothing this week. I think that's the reason that this was rejected by much of the audience at the time, was because they didn't really get what they were used to whenever it came to Mobile Suit Gundam. Gundam shows tend to have a pretty quick pace at the start. They establish themselves in the feeling that they're going for very swiftly. I don't really feel like Gundam X establishes itself swiftly enough, and it just goes on a very deliberate pace until things start to hit the fan at about the 1/3 mark. Again, this is going to turn off a lot of potential viewers because they're expecting to get started heavy like G Gundam did or like Gundam Wing did. So in reality, I think that this downside came more from just being in the wrong place to try that kind of a deliberate pace. I feel like if this show were released nowadays, it would probably be a lot more successful. I also think that's why you don't really see that many people who have enjoyed this show complaining about it, because they probably had different expectations going in than someone who was sitting down on their couch in Japan back in the 90s. At the end of the day, that's the perspective I'm thinking of when it comes to trying to figure out why the show didn't get ratings. The reason I'm saying this over and over is because I know someone in the comments is going to bitch at me for daring to say that the show isn't what it could have been when it wasn't what it could have been. How dare I? Anyway, when you compare it to its contemporaries and the expectations of someone on the time frame, it's not really a mystery as to why that show didn't go well, and I honestly think that a lot of people who have done videos on this particular show and saying, I don't know why this wasn't successful, you're not looking at it from a perspective that actually makes any sense. You can't look at it from the modern day. You have to look at it at the time it came out. Context matters. At that time, you were going from television shows that were relatively easy to get into with the previous entries to a show that's more of an acquired taste. Gundam X is not a bad show by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm completely of the opinion that when you take these factors into account, there's no mystery whatsoever as to why it didn't do that well on normal television. With that said, I do feel like we should talk about the positives so that people who are fans of Gundam X don't think that what I'm saying is the show is bad or something like that, because that's not what I'm saying. We were just analyzing what went wrong, and now we get to talk about what went right. Now, despite the criticisms, this is a show with a lot to love. The first strength of it you'll see right out of the gate is when you start up an episode. I would argue that until Iron-Blooded Orphans came out, Gundam X had the best anime openings in all of Gundam. Yeah, that's another thing I'll criticize Seed for, and that its openings are stupid and for teenage girls, and no, I'm not stopping. Gundam X knows how to get you hyped. The two songs that are used are sung by Saori Saito, then known under her stage name Akira Asakara, where she was the lead singer of the band Romantic Mode. The first opening features the track Dreams, and the second one features the track Resolution. Both are definite earworms, have amazing energy to them, and do exactly what an anime opening is supposed to do: get you hyped for the show. The interesting thing worth mentioning is that the biggest strength of Gundam X is in its writing and its concept. The concept of this show starts pretty simple, but maneuvers itself in such an interesting way that you can't help but be intrigued by it. This particular show has the prefix of After War. The general idea is that this timeline had its own version of the One-Year War, that ended with their version of Zeon dropping a ton of colonies onto the Earth in a cataclysmic final battle that ended up pretty much decimating the whole planet. This show also obeys some of the same rules that the original Gundam does alongside the rest of the Universal Century by dealing with the concept of new types. It's also in some senses a subversion of Gundam as we understand it. For example, there really isn't a Char clone that you see in this show. Now, some people try to say it's the Frost brothers, but that's actually incorrect. There isn't a Char clone that we see until the end, because we aren't following a parallel to Amuro Ray. If anything, the main character of Garrett Ron has more in common with the best boy of the Universal Century, Judo Ashta. Lance-Ro Dowell is the rival to the actual Amuro Ray parallel in Jamil Neat. We don't actually meet Lance-Ro until much later in the story. The reason for this is that Garrett is more or less a character in the sequel to somebody else's story that we already saw in a flashback. So basically, as a story, Gundam X is a sequel to an anime that never came out. It's a very unique way of telling a story because it's dealing with the immediate after effects of a massive war that caused the deaths of millions upon millions of people. The basic format is that we're following Jamil and his crew as they go across the Earth trying to find and protect fellow new types. As the show goes on, there is more and more emphasis on the importance of new types and what exactly they are. In a sense, the show aims to answer the question of what exactly a new type is, mostly because it was honestly left so vague in the Universal Century that it's really hard to nail down what qualifies one once you get past Zeta Gundam. Now I'm going to put up a spoiler warning real quick. The culmination of all events ends up at a moon base, which oddly enough is the same station that has been charging the X and the Double X to use their giant fuck-off moonbeam cannons. So, a bunch of people who at one point were all at war with one another go to the moon to get answers on what exactly a new type is, and the answer is kind of surprising.
What is a new type? The way you're using that term doesn't actually describe what's going on, my friend. Basically, some people were born with psychic powers. Most people are not born with psychic powers. So if you're just using new type to describe those people, you're spot on. Do you want to know what's funny, though? There are some people that seem to think that everybody who lives in space is a new type. Whew. Man, you'd have to be an absolute idiot to think that. I mean, it's pretty cool that you get to live in space, but you're not that special, come on now. That's a sort of goofy us versus them propaganda that's going to only end up in conflict, and then eventually war. Can you imagine going to war over some goofball trying to use one word completely wrong? Man, you'd have to be an idiot to do that. Wait, why are you all looking at me like that? Did someone actually... You dumb motherfucker!
All jokes aside, the interesting thing about this particular show is it really does take a lot of great time to let you just spend time with the characters that make the show what it is. And I really feel like that's the highlight of the whole shebang. You can't help but enjoy yourself in taking the same journey that Jamil and the crew are taking. Each little misadventure and each little discovery that you make about this world either is really charming or very thought-provoking. In a lot of ways, Gundam X stands alone as being one of the most consistently written and high-quality stories in the whole franchise. I think that's why it has such a loyal following despite its drawbacks. The writing is so damn good that it's easy for some people to overlook the flaws that drove a lot of other people away, which is also why I think so many people are like, well, gosh, I don't know why this wasn't successful. Because you like the story so much that you're not thinking of anything else. To wrap this video up, I hope that I've done a decent job of presenting what I think are the reasons that this particular show never really saw the success of a lot of its peers. The one thing that comes to mind is that the circumstances surrounding the show have ended up making it kind of a cult classic amongst Gundam fans and maybe even anime fans in general. It is a proverbial diamond in the rough. On a personal note, this is a show that I like quite a bit, but I only recommend it to people after I've told them about the downsides of it. If you're able to get past the flaws, what you find is a television show that takes an interesting look at concepts popularized by other Gundam shows, specifically ones written by Tamino, and attempts to turn it on its head in a fun and interesting way. If you're already a Gundam fan, feel free to check it out. If you're not, I really wouldn't suggest starting with Gundam X, but it is a good one to visit once you understand what the series is all about. With all that said, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, all that fun stuff. If you want to support the channel, get your hands on videos like this early, please don't hesitate to become a patron or channel member. The links to do so are down in the description. So with all that said, folks, thank you so much for watching. My name is Big Micah C, your favorite vanilla gorilla, and I will see you all next time.